Hello, my name is Matthew Hunsinger, and I live in Tacoma, Washington. I am taking Full Sail University's online game design program. My presentation will be on the nectar of the gods, mead. First, I will go a little into the history and the myth that leads to the name given to mead. Then I will list the ingredients needed and the process of making it. To where the name the nectar of the gods came from, it refers to when the Vikings would die and go to Valhalla. They would eat and drink mead all night and train all day for the battle for Ragnarok. This mead was considered the nectar of the gods. So then where did mead originate? Northern Europe, silly. Wrong. Mead originated from Africa. Back when civilizations were young and praying to the gods while they feuded, Africa had its dry and wet seasons like they do now. These dry and wet seasons would hollow out local trees that inhabit Africa's landscape. During the dry season, the bees would make their homes inside these hollowed out trees, producing honey and natural forms of fermenting agents. Once the rainy season came, the trees would fill with water and sit for several months at a time. This is when the locals would harvest the honey, but they also found that the honey had fermented and made an intoxicating beverage. This is the beginning of mead, and when the Africans would travel or foreigners would come and explore, they would be introduced to mead. Mead is well known in most of Europe as well as parts of India and China, but the discovery of sugar to make wine made the use of honey to make wine die out. This is why mead is not common in today's society. Now, in order to make mead, you're going to need a few things. There are many ingredients and items needed for brewing, so I will start with the food ingredients first. Then I will tell you what is needed for the brewing kit. Everything you gather will make a 5-gallon batch of mead, which will yield you about 25 750 milliliter bottles of wine. First, you are going to need yeast, and yeast is the most important ingredient. This will help you determine the percent of alcohol your batch makes. Lalvin D47 makes a 14 to 16% batch. However, if you use Lalvin K1V-1116, you have up to a 16 to 18% batch. You will need 2 tablespoons of yeast nutrients and yeast energizer, and 2 packets of whatever yeast you chose to use. There is also one other ingredient that will affect alcohol percent, and that is honey. You need 15 pounds of honey to make your mead balanced. The more honey you add, the stronger and sweeter your brew will be. If you add less honey, your brew will be weaker and not as sweet. The last thing you will need is 4 gallons of water, filtered. It needs to be filtered so your mead won't become contaminated. A thermometer is also handy in getting your temperatures right, as well as a stir stick, either glass or plastic, for the glass carboy you have. To make the kit, first you will need a 6-gallon plastic bucket with an airlock lid and a hole in the top of the lid. This will be what you mix your mead in and let it ferment. Then you will need a 6-gallon glass jug, which will be used as a carboy to house your mead until ready. You will need a cork plug to secure the lid of the glass jug. It needs to have a hole in the center of the plug, which I will explain later. You need an Econolock airlock used to let pressure escape and no contaminants in. You will need a bristle brush that will reach the inside of the glass jug for cleaning. You will need a plastic mixing utensil that will reach the bottom of the plastic bucket, and you will need a siphon tube to transfer the liquid from one bucket to another. Lastly, disinfectant. You need disinfectant. Bottles and corks will be needed, but you can acquire those at your leisure at a later date. Now we can start the process of making the mead. First, we are going to take the 6-gallon plastic bucket and fill it with 3 gallons of room temperature water and the 15 pounds of honey. This mixture is called the must, and the must wants to stay between 60 and 80 degrees the whole process. Now, with some of the water out of the last gallon, warm it up and pour it into the empty honey containers, shake it up, and add that to your mixture. This will allow you to get all of the honey out of the containers. Once that is done, put your packets of yeast into a small mixing bowl and start to warm the water on a stovetop. I used the low setting and it worked well for me. You're going to want to warm the water to between 104 and 109 degrees. Any lower or higher and the yeast won't live. In another mixing bowl, you will put 2 tablespoons of yeast nutrients and yeast energizer, add some water, and mix well. Then add that mixture to your must while stirring. Once the water has reached its required temperature, add it to the yeast and the yeast should start to bubble. This will show that the yeast is activating. Stir once to wet all of the yeast and wait for 15 minutes. While you wait, you're going to want to stir the must. After the 15 minutes, add the yeast to your must. and stir vigorously for another 15 minutes. The more you aerate the must, the stronger your batch will be. After aerating the bucket, you place the lid on it and put the Econolock airlock in the hole located on the top of the bucket, and let it sit in a cool, dry place for 2 weeks to ferment. Once the bubbles coming out of the Econolock airlock reach about 1 bubble every 30 seconds, the fermenting process is done. If you fail to put the airlock on, your bucket may have a potential to explode. This is due to the buildup of pressure. The same goes for your glass carboy as well. After the 2 weeks of fermenting, you will transfer the contents into the glass carboy using the siphon tube. After the transfer process, you're going to want to aerate the carboy. You will do this by using the glass stir stick, and you mix the liquid as you did before for another 15 minutes. After you aerate the carboy, you will place the cork with a hole in it in the opening of the carboy, and place the Econolock airlock in the hole. Again, this is essential for the brew to release its pressure. Now you'll let the mead sit in the carboy for 2 weeks to a month in a dry, cool place. And like any good wine, the more it sits, the more potent it will become. After the mead is finished, you can bottle it or put the solid plug on it and pull it directly from your carboy. Now, if yours went as well as I hope my batch will, then you'll have some mead ready to drink. Always drink responsibly, and I hope you enjoyed the information. Thank you for watching my presentation, and if any of you want to see the finished batch, email me and I will post the video of my finished project, and I will email you a link to that video. Thank you again.